Yes, I can introduce myself. My name's Mek. I'm an educator in the space. I've been in the space about 2.5 years. Prior to that, I was a, design director, creative director for about 20 years. Sounds crazy, but I started designing professionally when I was 17. And have, had the opportunity to play a lot and got really interested in Web3 coming out of the creator economy. I was working in the sort of MakersPlace, still sponsored by a couple companies, including Lincoln Electric as a welder and the Home Depot as a builder, and was looking at ways to build what essentially is like a exclusive content opportunity similar to what people do on Patreon. And I discovered the smart contract and haven't looked back since. So yeah, generally just want to kind of get into what is Web3 so that you kind of have the basics and hopefully give you some tangibles so that you can better understand how you interact with these things in a real way. So the first thing we should discuss is what is Web3? And so the way that I like to describe it, it's a family of technologies. So you have blockchain, you have the currency that sits on that chain, you have the assets that sit on some of those chains, and then you have some decentralized organizations. So a way to kind of explain that would be going through these slides. So we'll first talk about blockchain. If you're familiar with this at all, you might know Bitcoin, which has been around for a good almost 10 years. But I would imagine that some of you have heard of Bitcoin. One of the chains that most of what I do happens on Ethereum. There's another chain that is called Polygon. These are all essentially ledgers. So they're immutable records. Imagine if you had a bank account and that's a ledger and it was a public record that each individual transaction was being documented on. And you could then show it to anyone to prove that you actually did these transactions. And so the blockchain is sort of like a framework where all of this information is being stored publicly in a record that cannot be tampered with. And so the upside to blockchain is that because it's an immutable record, it's a definitive way to prove a number of things as you traverse, transactions on the internet, whether that be making purchases or sending funds. You can always verify that that information is accurate, and you can verify between which two people or wallets the transaction occurred. So there's a lot of security benefits to blockchain, but there are lots of other use cases for it, and each individual blockchain has its own purpose. The folks who get together and build these all have ideas in mind that they want to build on top of these ledgers. And I'll get into a little bit of the specifics around the one that I spend a lot of my time on, which is Ethereum. And then also Polygon, which has been a really interesting framework because it has solved a lot of the costs associated to these transactions. So there's a lot of really interesting opportunities that brands, for example, Starbucks has been able to tap into. They put their entire basically like loyalty program on that chain. So we'll get into that in a little bit. But I'll read it out as it says. It's a distributed ledger, AKA a database hosted by a network of computers. So instead of a single server, it offers users an immutable and transparent way to store information. And so I'll get into where you might see some of this first, which is the cryptocurrencies. And so as I was saying earlier, you may have heard of Bitcoin before. Everyone's kind of looking. Feel free to come in. You might have heard of Bitcoin as a cryptocurrency. So some of the things that can happen on these chains, depending on how they're built, is that you can have the financialization of currency happening. So essentially, with the way people are using cryptocurrency right now is you can send money from one person to another without having to employ the network of a bank. And so it became a really easy, secure way for people to just make simple transactions to one another. But as blockchain technology began to develop and people started to look at different use cases for these chains, they built them in different ways to allow them to do things like authenticate actual physical goods. And so there's a chain called Chainlink that is specializing in proof of authority, proof of authorship, proof of authenticity. And so as you sort of think about the ways that you would interact with these blockchains, it might first be a cryptocurrency. So if you've ever sent any kind of cryptocurrency, you were interacting with the blockchain. The one that I tend to spend most of my time on is Ethereum. And that essentially was built with Bitcoin as a model, but with the intention of also having digital assets be shared on that chain. And so a lot of the time and energy that's been put in building that blockchain has been focused on how do we build tools that rest on this chain that will support the cryptocurrencies, but also the assets. And so I'll read through about cryptocurrencies again. Cryptocurrency is a form of currency that does not rely on a central bank, government, or other intermediaries. Technically, it's a software that runs on blockchains. There's currently thousands of cryptocurrencies, but the most common are Bitcoin and Ether. And so another one that I mentioned, and I wanted to bring this up, is FWB, because there are also these smaller efforts being made to create cryptocurrencies that operate with other use cases. So for example, FWB is essentially like a social club that I'm a part of, and it has a token. And that token functions like a cryptocurrency, but it also is allowing users who hold that token, who are in the social club, to have voting power in the decisions that get made as a group. So we'll get into that a little bit more when I start to talk about the organizations that reside on these blockchains. But I wanted to bring that up because I think it's important to understand that sometimes you're going to be using these cryptocurrencies with the intention of transferring funds, like I said, securing goods, but it could also be used for governance and voting within the organizations. So one additional part of the blockchain ecosystem are fungible and non-fungible tokens, or as you might know it, the NFT. And so I've highlighted some of the NFTs that you might have come across. Some of them were popular or maybe more trendy projects that have come out in the last, I want to say, 2.5 years. The biggest and one of the first really popular ones is Bored Ape Yacht Club, which is that first little ape that you see. And then in the order, Doodles, Deadfellas, which is one of my favorite projects, so I had to throw that in there. And I put Boss Beauties because they've been doing some really interesting stuff with their project lately as they partner with brands. Recently, they did an entire execution with Barbie. So they have a graphic novel of sorts that they did in partnership with Barbie, but they've also been doing a lot of sort of education around this. And so I brought these up because this is generally what people think of when they think of the assets associated with blockchain, specifically Ethereum. And so ultimately, it's sort of like a layering, right? So you have the blockchain that provides the framework to transfer both the currency, the digital currency itself, but also assets that can sit on this chain. And so what's happening is there's a number of different kinds of tokens that you can establish on the blockchain, and the tokens themselves can operate as a tool of financialization. So it can be like money, or it can be, like I said, governance, or in this case, it can be a collectible that can serve many other purposes. And so for me, the more fun part of the blockchain ecosystem is what these tokens can allow for. So essentially, you would become a part of one of these social clubs similar to FWB. You would purchase one of these assets. There's tons and tons of projects that you can choose from. These are just some that have been around for a while. Most are quite expensive, so I wouldn't dive right in and suggest anybody tries to buy any of these. Bored Ape Yacht Club, I don't even know, I think I saw one being sold for close to $100,000 the other day. So I think like these are more just examples of what you might have seen, but there's thousands of projects that people have put out over the last couple years. And what these individual assets do is allow you to prove that you are part of this community. And so depending on the project founder and the community itself, they sort of get together and decide what the goals are, what the initiatives might be, what the, I want to say collective group purpose is. And the asset that you hold generally is unique from every other one that's in the collection. There are certainly scenarios where you can have the same kind of token that somebody else has. Those are the fungible type. And it's, you know, kind of on the, I want to say, like, it's the onus of the person who creates the project to decide if they want to do 100 of the same thing. And so everyone has the same sort of like token or ticket. Imagine like a comic book, right? You are an artist, you're drawing an entire graphic novel, and each individual copy is the same. At most, you maybe number them differently, but they're the same. And in the instance of NFTs, you're getting a unique sort of one of one in a collection of many. Some collections can go, I think the largest collection I've seen is 25,000 assets. And so generally, I think the number was 10,000. You see a lot of projects with 10,000 or maybe even 1,000, depending on how, you know, how they want to roll it out. But you become one of a group of assets, and then you have ownership of some part of what that token allows. So that token might allow you access to some maybe private chats. It might allow you access to events, like physical events that you would attend in person. They could be online. In some scenarios, one token could allow you in the future to make a new token. And in that way, you'd have two, and you could sell one if you wanted. And so it's really up to the owner of the project to decide how those work. But the idea is that these are collectible items that essentially can hold some value, but are more of a pass to the social club that you join. So I'll read what it says here. An NFT is a digital deed representing ownership of a unique digital object. These objects commonly include artwork or digital versions of collectibles, such as illustrated avatars of the Bored Ape Yacht Club or Time magazine covers. They're authenticated on the blockchain. And that goes back to the original piece about you know, the purpose of the blockchain. And because it's an immutable record, you will always be able to point out which wallet made the purchase for the specific one. Say it's yours, and that no one else has the one that you have. And so that's, I want to say generally, as far as we'll go on assets. And then the last piece that we'll talk about will be DAOs, which is essentially like a business that is flat, and it sort of operates in the Web3 world. And so imagine that you, well, I'll talk about the few that are listed here, and there's a few I have in mind. But the ones that I think might have permeated outside of, you know, the general population are Pleaser DAO, FWB, which I mentioned, Constitution DAO. And these are not necessarily better or worse, but I think they had news that permeated outside of, you know, the space, as we call it. And so Pleaser DAO you might have heard of because they generally buy fairly expensive things that don't necessarily make sense to everyone. One of the things that they're known to have purchased was the Doge artwork for the Dogecoin dog. They also purchased the Wu-Tang record, which only had one copy. And so both of those things were $4 million. They raised $69 million at some point and have just been making investments on art and cultural artifacts, if you will. And so I think maybe if there's any DAOs you might have heard of, that's one. FWB is another. They're one of the first DAOs that I studied. They are A16Z backed. They had a $100 million valuation within a year. And they started building technology. And so they've been a really interesting case study for what a DAO can do and the way that it operates. When I found out about FWB, I was also made aware that one of the founders had also been responsible for creating the first, or I want to say the most popular digital influencer named Lil Miquela. Also, that social club had members that were culturally relevant in this, you know, sort of like, I don't want to say zeitgeist of, you know, culture. But I think Virgil Abloh was a member of FWB. There's quite a few people that I've met prior to even knowing anything about the space that are members. Chris Dixon, who's another big FWB I want to say like he's an advocate, but he's also an A16Z, I want to say top level associate. I don't know his actual title there, but yeah. So they're one of the ones that I think might have permeated because of all the news and the way that they were sort of setting a precedent for what DAOs can do. And another one that might have permeated was the Constitution DAO, which ultimately raised $40 million in a 7-day period in an attempt to buy the Constitution. It's one of those things that doesn't sound real, but I watched it happen. It was quite odd to me for a number of reasons. They ended up not successfully, they were outbid, so they didn't successfully buy the Constitution, and ended up returning the funds in some way to the folks who had contributed. But those are just 3 examples. There's plenty others. I have friends in a DAO called Pizza DAO, and their only real goal was to support pizza shops during the pandemic. And so they were producing events that were both local and global. They celebrated International Pizza Day in, I believe, 50 different countries for the first time. They are always present at conferences. They throw pizza parties. I mean, it's an interesting group of people, but I remember running into them in Las Vegas. They went to a pizza expo and were competing. One of the guys in the DAO is now a pizziola because he won the competition for making pizzas a particular way. So yeah, I mean, there's lots of reasons why someone might form a DAO, but I'll read what the slide actually says here. A DAO is a headless corporation that raises and spends money. All decisions are voted on by members and executed by encoded rules on the blockchain. They are often formed by congregations of strangers who are geographically dispersed but share a common goal. And so this is sort of, you know, the idea is that you have a goal in mind, a thing that you'd like to achieve, and you do the work of, you know, organizing ideas around what that looks like and sort of put it out into the world, and folks join up with you. So what tends to happen, I'll say, is not every project has a DAO, but in the instance that DAOs are formed, it's more to create a structure so that people can be paid, so that if you are essentially like forming a business and generating enough revenue to pay to the folks who are helping contribute, you want to have it formalized. And so all of this happens in a very autonomous way. So you can have, you know, pay structures where a person has, you know, a couple of checks and balances that they go through, and then that money is automatically dispersed because it's already set in a contract to spend. And I think, you know, when it comes to the governance and decision making, you can set a date for at what point all of the folks who are in your social club have an opportunity to vote. And going back to the earlier slide on NFTs, these NFTs can also sometimes be used as governance tools. So if you're a member of a social club, let's say you're a member of Doodles and Doodles has a DAO, and Doodles says, next year we want to open a theme park, and we want all of you to vote on, you know, what the top 3 rides that we actually make are, because you're a holder of that DAO's token as a Doodle owner. You then would be privy to that vote, and they would take into account what you said, but all of that would be recorded on chain and be verifiable. So when you think about the ramification of what this technology can disrupt, if folks understand how it works and how to use it, you can think about all these traditional systems that exist that could completely be altered and made safer, made more secure, made more verifiably, you know, something that can be checked, like voting, for example, right? You think about all of, you know, the national campaigns that end up in these sort of like stalemates of what state is red or blue, recounting ballots, how do you, you know, check the voter rolls and all these things. You can think about these systems as case studies for what it looks like to decentralize our more centralized systems. And so I love talking about this stuff because I think it gives us a kind of like a glance at the possibility of ways that we can improve the things that we think don't work. As somebody who, you know, is often feeling a little powerless in the systems that we live in, seeing the potential for what these mechanics can do on a small scale is super interesting to me. So yeah, hopefully that was helpful. And I think I'll just go back to this top slide. So I imagine that there's not too many questions here. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. I think for me, like, it's a dense amount of information to absorb, but I'm happy to share these slides and available online if you ever have questions. But I think, like, you know, again, for me, it's the basics and the fundamentals of understanding how this stuff works is really just a tip of the iceberg, and it's meant to, well, I won't say meant to, because I think each individual project that's put out, it has its own intention, but the way that I share it, it's meant to sort of illuminate some of what this space is, and then give you all an opportunity to really chew on it and think about how you might want to interact with it. Yeah, sure. Sure.
When it comes to DAOs, because that's probably what like excites me most about Web3, how do you think we can use DAOs and more, like, just newer ways of governance to actually like disrupt those systems that you were talking about?
I think DAOs is one of the more interesting pieces because it kind of encompasses all the other pieces, right? Or can. And so the way that I think about DAOs, I'll say for me personally, is this opportunity to leverage the networks that I have access to. So what I've done in the time that I've been in this space is try to learn as much as I can and identify the people who can be helpful in one way or another. So whether that's like they know something that I would like to know, or they have access to people that I would like to have access to, or facilities or funding or whatever that looks like. So I've developed, you know, relationships with people over time where as I kind of get a better sense of what I'd like to be doing, I can reach out to people and say, okay, I have this thing that I know that you could be helpful with. Would you be interested in X, Y, Z, right? And so I've built these relationships that will help me pull this thing together. But what I realized that I'm not doing is I'm not leveraging those relationships for the access that everybody else could have, right? And so there's this opportunity within a DAO structure to invite a group of people in who now have access to my network. And I think that that's like one of the sort of like overlooked benefits of DAOs is that you have this larger sort of group of people who may not all be interacting individually with one another, but because they are in this social club, you have a sort of like delegation that can happen, right? So you have maybe 1,000 people that can relay and give input and feedback to 10 people. And those 10 people are the people who would then, you know, kind of like put the first few proposals through to say, well, there's a lot of people who think that we should throw a party, right? And in that way, you sort of start to activate those who would otherwise just be like kind of passive, you know, community members. And I think that like when we start to think about the unification of like power, that's what we don't have today. And that to me is like the biggest piece, is figuring out how you keep people engaged and participating, because that's where I think we fail the most in the current system, is that we all want to fix things, but we're not unified in the way that we do it. And so one of the examples that I always bring up is, it was right around the first Black Panther movie. I remember everybody getting excited. Like everybody in the Black community was like ready to go to this movie. And I was like, they really need to start doing voter registration at the movie theater, because if everybody was as excited about voting as they were about going to see this movie, right, this community would be moving in the right direction. But then I also thought about, in that same time frame, we also had the Black Lives Matter March on Washington, which the week after was followed by the Women's March, which the week after was followed by the transgender folks. And I was thinking to myself, if we had just unified and had one march, we would have had a much bigger presence. And that message would have come across, because essentially each one of those groups had the same problem. It was the administration, right? And so I always think about this unification of people in power that we don't see. And I think these assets would be helpful, right? Having a framework where it's like you can see each individual person's vote, so no one feels disenfranchised when they do, right? And so, I'm one of these people who's like very, politically aware of the failures that we have. I watched Stacey Abrams fight in Georgia against a governor who should have recused himself. And it's like, you can't prove that that system failed, but you know it did. And if he wasn't allowed to clear voter rolls and throw votes out and close, poll sites and make it so that people couldn't be bussed. And he literally was, there were folks who were trying to bus people to poll sites, and he was trying to pass a bill saying you can't do that, right? And so it's like, there are a lot of ways that we can see the disadvantages, but we don't have ways to work around them. And I think that the mechanics of blockchain technology can start to push us in a direction where it's an immutable record. Each individual person has their own sort of ID. So we know I voted, and they know how I voted. And it's not something that can be thrown out, and it's not something that can be pushed aside. And so I think, having the mechanisms in place to be able to help people unify their ideas, but then also like stamp them in time as a record that cannot be tampered with is super, super important. Hopefully that was not too much of an answer. Yeah, cool. Mm-hmm.
It's about NFTs.
Mm-hmm.
Besides an NFT being a rare collectible asset that may or may not go up in value,
yeah.
What other uses? What other functionality do you? What other uses do you see for NFTs as a functional technology in the future?
So many things. I was having a conversation once about medical records, right? Because it can literally be any asset. But there were some folks who, they essentially had to leave where they were, right? They were refugees, and they didn't have the wherewithal to like take all their things. And you think about the number of people who were able to grab their documents and the number of people who weren't in that skirmish, And to say that like when you get to a new country, you still have your records, and it's stored in the blockchain as a digital asset that you can read, right? And so you think about an NFT can be a book, it can be all of your identification, it can be an access pass to your country club. Like it literally could be any checkpoint system that you would require, because it's as secure as any other thing that you would own, right? So you think about your ATM card, for example, right? That ATM card could be used for many things. Like in a way it is, you can spend it anywhere, right? But you could also use it to verify that you are who you say you are. So there are now systems that will allow you to sign for a package and use your ATM card as a way to check that you're the person, right? Instead of your actual ID. And so I think there's so many use cases. I'm sure there's like some that are escaping me right now, but home deeds. There are people who have sold homes on blockchain, and what you're getting is essentially an NFT, right? You're getting the records in a collectible, a digital collectible that could be any number of things. So it could be a PDF file that you now have ownership of that you could maybe sign and send back. Like it could be whatever you need it to be, which is, I guess, the best part, right? Because when you think about what an NFT is, all it is a digital asset. So it could be any file format. It could be a video file. It could be a, like I said, a PDF. It could be a GIF. It could be, there are HTML NFTs, right? So one of the first projects that I worked on was the first instance of a dynamic NFT that Manifold built for Steve Aoki's Aokiverse. And if you go to that NFT on Opensea, you can actually navigate it like a website in the Opensea browser. And most people don't realize like it's a website, but it's wrapped in an ERC 721 contract, right? And so that NFT that you have could open the door for, it could be a course that you take in college. It could be anything.
As a follow-up, do you see us, general public, moving away from the terminology NFT, just a digital contract?
Yes and no. I feel like brands are trying to do that. Brands are trying to, call it a digital collectible, digital asset, because there's this stigma around the word or the phrase NFT. But it's semantics to me. I don't think it matters what you call it if you understand what the technology is. And so, yeah, a lot of people, shy away from, they're like, oh, I don't mess with NFTs, that's a scam. And it's like, well, then people start using other terms, and it's still a scam if that's what it is, right? But I think the thing that they miss is that there's a technology there that has the potential to do many things, and it's not one kind of thing. An NFT is not a JPEG, right? That's sort of how people see it. And they're like, oh, I can just copy paste that. And it's like, you could, but you wouldn't get into the party with your copy paste, right? Like that's gonna get me in this party because of the technology behind the JPEG. And so, yeah, it's a really interesting and promising technology in my opinion. And I think I'm really just interested to see people get at the meat of what is really there, because the topical stuff, even the financialization part of it, it seems to be where all the attention is, but there's a gem beneath that, and I really hope people can start to discover what that looks like. Cool. Yeah. Thank you.
Very much.
Thanks for having me, Superchief. Thanks, MetaMask. Thanks for all the sponsors, Canvas, all the good peeps. Hi, friends. I'm excited. I'm just going to do a quick little preface of what we're going to be talking about today. And then we're going to get hands-on, because last time, my friend was here last time, and then these friends were here last time. They saw me talk about the culture and the ethos of Web3, which I usually love to chat about. Well, we already did that. We recorded that. So that was done and did. You guys can find that online, right? But this time we're going to get hands-on because we're talking about BIPOC inclusion within Web3. And so conceptualizing a little bit about what that meant to me and how to involve people a little bit more heavily in the experience of blockchain and NFT creation, I figured it'd be really cool for us to create squares that will eventually become a quilt, and that will eventually become an NFT that we collect and own ourselves, and potentially we'll be able to show at the canvas. Wink, wink over there. Yeah, thumbs up, boom, boom. So how quilts and NFTs preserve BIPOC history. The ways in which BIPOC communities have used mediums of creation to tell their stories, our stories, right? My name's Elise Swopes. I am a self-taught creator, graphic design, videographer, artist. I'm just like all around, just say yes, figure it out later type gal. I've been a creator for, all of my life, but I've been professionally a creator over a decade now, partnering with different brands and agencies, whether that's Apple, Adidas, Adobe. Probably seen me on a lot of Adobe commercials and maybe on the splash screen of Premiere Pro for 2 years. But I love cityscapes. I love creating with cityscapes. I love melding them with a surreal message, whether that's imagining that the world is ending or maybe it's restarting. I don't know. It depends on your perspective. But the reason why I'm here talking about NFTs is because in 2021, I sold about $250,000 in ETH of NFTs. And then I sold out my first Nifty Gateway collection within a matter of minutes. But you know, the thing about me and every single collection and every single thing that I do is that there is a social reasoning or give back behind every single one of them. So my Nifty Gateway collection was supporting giraffe displacement in Kenya. I was supporting Kenyans, making sure that they were protecting giraffes and protecting themselves in the midst of that. And then also my Web3 impact agency, Sunrise Art Club, we are committed to curations, education, and beyond. We started one of the first NFT marketplace for incarcerated artists. So, just trying to figure out how to use this stuff for good, which is really important to me. But I also have a editing app called Urban Jungle, which I'm very proud of. But I don't talk about it much, and I should talk about it more. So I'm talking about it here. And so I just earned a life experience credit at Columbia College Chicago. I graduated college last year after being dropped out for 12, 13 years. So yeah, we did what we had to do. Yeah, we made it. We made it through the mud. All right. Enough about me. Enough about me. You guys know me. I like this title, From Thread to Blockchain. Is that kind of cute? It's like, it feels like it. All right, so why are we talking about quilts and NFTs? Don't worry about it, we're gonna get down to it. Quilts and NFTs are both unique and one-of-a-kind creations. Can we all agree? Probably. They both hold value and serve as a representation of the creator's artistry, creativity, and craftsmanship. And both mediums serves as a means of storytelling and self-expression. Okay, see where I'm going here? See what's happening? Okay, they're both an investment and increase in value over time. I don't think a lot of people know that, but quilts can, depending on which one you find. And quilts and NFT have a cultural significance within BIPOC communities. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit and what that means. But again, I felt like getting a little bit more hands-on and thinking about how each intricate piece of square that we each create becomes a quilt together will, in turn, kind of suggest what the blockchain is all about, right? So the guiding principles of Web3, which we are going to be feeling in equity of the quilt making, is decentralization. So no person or group controls the network of information. So in essence, no person or group here is going to say, okay, your quilt can't, your piece of the square can't be in my quilt. No, all the pieces of the square is about to be in the quilt, all right? Transparency. Everyone can see and check the information about the transactions because it's public for everyone, okay, to see. Now, we'll all be able to see where our squares fit in the quilt, set it down, stitch it up. I'll let you know how it's going to be actually become a quilt at the end, but we're not physically sewing anything, don't worry. Just cutting out some paper, keeping it cute today. Empowerment gives users control over their data and their digital identity. So we're going to give you some empowerment to feel that you can create that square that creates that piece in the quilt. That is your square. You've decided that square, okay? And peer-to-peer. Peer-to-peer network is a computer system, and all computers in this network are equal, okay? And that's really what we're going to be getting down to today, is this peer-to-peer network, knowing that each one of us have the same size square. We do. Yeah. I know you're excited about your square. I'm excited about your square. And in turn, you know, we're all being able to request and give resources, file services to other computers without needing one computer that controls everything. So we've got a bunch of scissors over there. We've got a bunch of glue. We're sharing it. There's enough for everybody here, though, this time, for sure, which is good. So don't worry about any P2P. So storytelling and resistance. So just a little backstory about quilts and what they really mean to what we're really trying to accomplish today. Now, quilts were a form of resistance during slavery, of course. They were a super integral part of the Underground Railroad, so this really ensured that they were able to communicate with one another, right? And that, to me, is really what the blockchain is about, is this decentralization of information and connection between one another. We can share information without someone telling us what we can say and how we can do it. And a lot of these were often created by women to tell stories in fabrics and quilts, right? And then there's a lot of African-American heritage, like the Geesbee's bent quilts created by women from a small town, Alabama. Huge form of artistic expression. And then also quilting has been passed down through generations, families and communities, which in essence serves and preserves cultural identity, community, and identity. And again, that's what blockchain is all about, is really solidifying our place in history, telling our story, and implementing that. So the evolution of storytelling has now become into NFTs, where now NFTs have the potential to become a new form of storytelling, very clearly, right? Talking to my friend here, thinking about how we want to tell our story a little bit more deeply from all the chaos of art creation, a little bit more intentionally, maybe. And then it offers a unique way to showcase digital, one-of-a-kind artwork. And NFTs can preserve cultural traditions and stories, of course, that quilting has done for generations, especially for BIPOC communities. And it can also provide a platform for visibility and recognition, which of course quilts, in essence, have done, and so NFTs can as well. And NFTs can offer a new level of ownership and authenticities for creators, like Meg was saying. It's all about offering a new avenue of revenue streams and opportunities and memberships for artists and others alike. Now, let's create, because I'm tired of talking. I like getting hands-on. I talked a lot last time, so I'm like, I talked like over last time. I was like, yeah, I don't have enough time. And I could say so much more, but my favorite thing is to get hands-on today. So during this interactive session, I invite you, okay? You. I see you over there, eyes to eyes. Maybe even you guys back there, you can come on in too, no worries. I invite you to create your own unique quilt square using some colored paper over there. I think we have some pencils as well. We got some pens, but you don't have to draw anything. I want you to cut out shapes, and I want you to glue the shapes together based on some themes that I'm going to provide you, okay? That you're going to pick out yourself. So a little pick out of the little, either my hat. I don't know if we want to go all the way there. I was thinking of putting my hat, but I was like, I don't know about all that. But I have it in a little thing where you can pick out and kind of pick a word that coincides with Web3, but also about BIPOC communities, what those words mean for communities who are underserved in this community or in this space of Web3 so consistently. So I invite each one of you to draw a random thing from the themes that we provide that inspires you. And then I will be taking high resolution scans of each piece, okay? And then I will put each piece together so that it will create one NFT, and then you provide us your wallet address, we mint that, and then we send it to you, right? Easy as peasy. And of course, that in essence is really signifying the importance of chain, but also giving you the experience to own a piece that you've created. And I think that's one of the most exciting things to me, is just getting hands-on and then seeing it digitally in your wallet, knowing that it's real, and it really exploring, the whole essence of what this is about. Now I've got a QR code that I'm gonna share eventually on here at the end that you can scan, and then you can fill out, put your address in there, and then we'll send you, or we'll literally send you the NFT. So you don't have to do anything. It'll come in your wallet. You also get an email confirming that we've sent the NFT as well. I've thought that far, you guys. I got this. Don't worry about it. Yeah, I got this. So once you do that, you'll have the NFT in your wallet. It'll be really cool. We'll do something fun with it. And then we've created an NFT together that has the theme of BIPOC inclusion and community and what we're really trying to do here in this new space. So how about we pick some themes? Yeah, let's go. Just because I'm standing up, and I'll just, so everyone can get their shine. I got empowerment. Empowerment, I feel like usually I always imagine a fist, but me and Mike were just talking about how really empowerment is all about women and the embodiment of what women or female identifying people, embody in this, space and many spaces. So I felt like needed a feminine kind of vibe to it. Boom. Thanks, guys. Thanks, boys. You guys don't have to stand like me, but I just...
I was debating about the right way to read this, and I think now it's this way.
That's the way.
Yeah, I like that.
This is the way it was conceived.
It looks really cool.
Accountability. It's a treacherous, windy road, and there are many pieces missing, and there are people who have to jump in and fill in the gaps, and somehow we make a pyramid up here. So we did the job. We held ourselves accountable.
Mission accomplished.
We built the pyramid.
We built this.
I don't know how we get here. I just know this is the goal. Thank you.
Very nice, very nice.
I had social justice,
So
It's amazing.
the first visual that came to mind was the burning of the old, and I think when we are feeling that desire for justice, there's always like rage and resentment and some of these heavy emotions associated with it. So I wanted to make sure I included space for like the positive outcomes of what this justice is accomplishing, and like for me, I just want a better world, a better future built on love and like a balance with nature and, you know, our biological rhythms. So, and I feel like Mother Nature is also contributing to the burning down of the old in some ways.
She wants
Yeah.
this one.
Yeah, no, if we haven't been told them as much, for sure.
Can I add? You're really good at this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah, I mean the pieces of paper, like the edges that you use for this.
Leaves? Like,
No, it's not the leaves, it's not the heart, it's the KR. So font. And honestly,
So good.
the use of the holes.
Yeah,
punched in the
that's
paper
it
to
for
get-
me.
To do the
Pat, low-key, you've been waiting for this exercise.
yeah.
I'm so glad.
I've been feeling frustrated because I haven't been creatively inspired, kind of like you were saying. So it was nice to get to.
That makes me so happy. Oh my god. Yay. Amazing.
Okay.
Oh, you got stuff coming up. What?
My work
Wait, that's
called
sick.
self-sovereignty.
What?
Basically, one of the things that I think is most important about Web3 in general is the ability to actually write history down. So in a permanent sort of way. That's one of the reasons that I mint my work at all, is to actually have like control over my own artwork and over how, I don't know, like just the way that it's written down, right? And the importance of narrative in that way. So I thought it'd be important to put some books, and then, you know, leaves are always aesthetic. So that's
So good. I can't tell you. Yeah, literally. And it ties in your 3D, like you're a 3D artist, you know? So it's very like pop out. That's so cool. Wow.
Oh, and mine is it's ethical development. It's like,
Oh, wow.
I say, what is that, right? So I go from a historical standpoint. This is a rough symbol of a historical quilt.
Yes.
Actually, and if I remember the name, it was called the monkey wrench. And the monkey wrench was a signal for runaway slaves. When they see the sign, it's like, get your stuff together, we leaving tonight. Right?
Wow.
And so now, but with the homage to, of course, David Hammond's with his black and red flag sort of thing. So that was my take on, you know, when I think about ethical development. So how do you develop something ethically, right? And one of those things is the road to freedom.
Yes. It's beautiful. So beautiful.
Wow,
I love that.
I probably did the laziest piece out of everything.
Oh.
So this is collective ownership. So I was gonna cut. I'm not that good at cutting. I'm really good at drawing though. But it's kind of just a graffiti on a wall. It says Rehab Iraq, and Iraq is my group collective of different artists, multimedia artists, and I collaborated with you since you're the one that I guess made this, and I just added the little doodad, so it's collective ownership with the love.
Amazing. I know you say it may be lazy, but that's years and years of skill and talent in one culmination, you know, so we appreciate it. Good job. Yeah. Good job, everybody. That was really fun.